fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me solid through and through, and such eagle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Disciples of Ed, the first one since the NHL season has been underway. I'm your host, Rob, joined again tonight by Steve. How you doing, Steve?
A lot better that hockey's on, and I'll be even better once I get my cable situation fixed.
We're now officially in the midst of what is like 160 some odd days in a row with NHL hockey to watch.
Barring any massive COVID outbreak in the league, yes.
Yeah, I had some issues now with Carolina postponing a couple games, so hopefully that's the extent of it. Hopefully no more. Also joined tonight by Joe Bork. How you doing, Bork?
Doing really well. Like Steve said, I echo him. Once the hockey season starts, everything's better and well in the world again, especially when you can watch a game for 160 straight days. So that definitely makes everything great again.
Hockey has a way of fixing everything. And so far, 4 games into the NHL season, the Flyers are off to a 3-1 start. Kind of a mixed bag of I mean, obviously it's great to have 3 wins in the first 4 games, but they've kind of, I mean, the goal differential looks great. They've won each of their games by 3 goals. They did have the blowout loss 6-1 the other night against Buffalo, but each game getting outshot by a pretty significant margin. And guys, is that Bork? I'll start with you. Is that a cause for concern? Excuse me, for you? It's only the first 4 games. You know, there's plenty of hockey left, plenty of time to get kind of right the ship in that regard. But it's not sustainable trying to win hockey games when you're being significantly outshot. And is that something that concerns you so far through the first 4 games with the Flyers?
It's something maybe a little bit. I think it's just you had a guy in Niskanen retire. You brought in an offensive-minded guy only in the offseason and kept Justin Braun. I think you're trying to figure out where the defense fits into place now without Matt Niskanen. You didn't have a preseason to do such. And I think that's where I've seen most teams at in the league early. Defense has kind of been the bugaboo for most of the league. You had a lot of 8-goal total games, one, I think, 9-goal total game. So you had a lot of high-scoring games early, and I think it's just these teams without a full preseason or really a full training camp, even a different type of training camp, are adjusting a little bit differently, and defense is kind of the last inkling to come for most of these teams, it seems. But that's just kind of the way for now. I'm not too worried about it because of the common factor of we're 3-1 and we're able to win despite allowing the shots. And I think that shows the makings of a good coach team, but also just a good skilled team to be able to win despite getting outshot. So I think the Flyers will be fine if they just have this, like you said, Rob, this is just the first 4 days adjusting. And as of now, that's the way I'm looking at it with no preseason. It's not the only team, us being the only team I've seen this from. I've seen it from many teams around the league that have allowed multiples of goals early when we thought, like, for example, we thought that Colorado was one of the best defenses. They had a great second game, but they came in and looked pretty bad to St. Louis in the first game. So I think it's all just about, without a preseason, adjusting to coming back again. And some of these teams haven't played since March. So I'm not too worried about it. I think it's just adjusting to the lineup. And I think when Ghost comes back, the lines, now that he, other than the COVID stuff, is supposed to be fully leg healthy, might fit into place better. It's also going to depend, obviously, on when Myers comes back. But because of our steady goaltending, too, I'm pretty set on being okay with it until we adjust and get going and get the defense honed in, because Elliott was an absolute tank last night, and Hart maybe had a little blunder, obviously, in the Buffalo game, but the first 2, he was pretty good, made some great key saves himself. So due to that, I'm not too worried about it now. If this was 2 weeks down the line and we're on the podcast and the same things happen, then yeah, I might be that.
Yeah, certainly lots of positives as well to take away from the first 4 games. The scoring depth has shown itself to be very, very good. Elliott, as you mentioned, the 40 save shutout last night, so goaltending shouldn't be an issue. But the fact that, I mean, they've through the first 4 games of this season, they've converted on basically 1 out of every 5 shot attempts. That's not going to hold up throughout the course of the season. They need to get more pucks on net. And I did say that it was just the first 4 games, but this is something that's kind of gone back to the playoffs up in the bubble up in Toronto last year, where they're consistently getting outshot every game, starting with that Montreal series. And Steve, are you concerned by this, or do you think it's do you have a opinion similar to that of Boric, where it's just something that they kind of need to work out the kinks?
I agree with a lot of what Boric said. It was a pretty quick training camp. There was no preseason. They didn't. 4 games in, we're seeing that we didn't properly replace Niskanen, which didn't seem like it should have been such a tall task. But they just got an offensive guy in Gustafsson instead of somebody that was a little bit more well-rounded.
Are you saying that Gustafsson's not that good?
Oh, you want to go at it now? You want to start this now? We're hardly 7 minutes into the podcast. Because I'm ready. I'm prepared. I had a written statement.
Let's hear your unfiltered
I had
take on this.
a written statement prepared about Gustafsson after the first game. But I was supposed to have paper and I was going to crumple it up, but I don't. I've since shredded that because, yes, Gustafsson he's helped the power play's second unit along with, our fantastic depth. Second unit has looked very good. Our power plays look good overall. But he's just maddening in the defensive zone with the constant turnovers. And you know what? Let's push this off for a little bit later down the pod. Where I think what I'm seeing of Gustafsson is something that you irrationally think when you see Shane Gostisbehere. But let's go.
Okay,
let me just go back to the question at hand.
Now you're calling my thought process irrational. We're definitely going to go at it later on this show. But carry on.
Stay tuned. I'm slightly concerned, but when you think we had one full game out of Couturier, who was our biggest play driver for the forwards, Kevin Hayes has done as best he can to kind of fill that hole there. And then everybody else is trying. Our neutral zone play is kind of concerning, along with our defensive zone play. But again, it's trying to fit the pairs right now. Sandholm and Myers is the best pair we've had. Obviously, they were the only pair to continue from last year right now. But I don't like Braun with Provorov. I think it's just a mess. Gustafsson and Hag was atrocious. It's a cause for concern, but we're 4 games in, which in a 56-game season, it's about 7% of the way through. We're 3-1. Our very, very amazing forward depth has, covered the holes with their offense so far. But it is a cause for concern. Hart and Elliott have played fantastic so far. I don't blame Hart for that 6-1 defeat. Like Boric said, the 2 first goals are 1 a ridiculous shot, 2 bad bounce. Shit like that happens, and then he gives up a softie, which will happen. Confidence kind of does waver, so I understand why he was pulled, and then Elliott was able to continue with his strong play from the night before. But it's really just figuring out this defense in the transition game, because once they figure that out, then we're really going to be a force. And even without this right now, we're 3-1. So we're not looking too bad in the standings, but we really got to get some of the pieces of our shit together, so to say.
3-1, and through the first 4 games of the season, leading the whole entire NHL in goals scored. In fact, that first game, I believe it was, against the Penguins. By the way, how awesome was that to sweep the Penguins? I mean, just
that was great.
Anytime we have that kind of success against Pittsburgh, it's fucking awesome. Fuck them.
Yep.
Especially when the guy we're going to be hitting on later in Gustafsson actually destroyed Pittsburgh offensively, and they're probably looking at the games he's played since going, oh, well, we probably should have D'd him up a little bit better. But, they really played Pittsburgh. We stomped them. We beat them by 3 each game. That's the way you want to start a season. And then our next round is against another team that's not technically a rival, but most of us don't like Boston, so it's going to be fun to see how that goes, too.
Yeah, well, talking about stomping Pittsburgh, that first game, what was it, 11 out of 12 forwards recorded at least 1 point in that game?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about scoring depth in our season preview episode, and I think that kind of is the epitome of scoring depth right there. When you got 11 out of 12 guys getting on the board, that's pretty impressive. And if they can, obviously, you don't expect them to do that every single night, but if you can get scoring output from multiple lines more often than not, then that depth is going to be something it's going to be a huge factor for the Flyers going forward. So
Yeah.
really great to see that.
Yeah, the only thing I have to comment on that was huge because Jake was the one guy who's obviously been a veteran on the team for years that didn't perform well in that game, and then since has put up 3 points in the 3 games. So it was great to see all the younger guys really step up against Pittsburgh too, amongst the other veterans. James Van Riemsdyk, shout him out too, to really be able to get that series sweep against Pittsburgh and really round and pound them the whole time.
Yeah, very much the case so far. And you mentioned Voracek. I just want to touch on this real quick. How about that beef that he's got going with Mike Sealski? That was a pretty interesting moment there in that Zoom press conference that they had going.
It was fucking hilarious. It was uncensored, and Konechny trying to hold in his laughter. It purely
That was hilarious. Yeah,
great.
TK trying to not die was probably
trying to not spit out his water.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
That might have been more funny than Jay coming at Sealski, just because of him, like the reaction. That could have been on like an SNL skit or something.
And also Voracek, like he has like the moment where he leans back, looks over, realizes that Konechny is struggling holding it together, and you can see Voracek just kind of like chuckling to himself. Fantastic.
Absolutely peak Voracek right there, peak Jake. As someone who had a press credential back in the 17-18 season, I can confirm that Jake was definitely the most interesting person to interview after every home game, but always good for a few cuss words and, just being completely unfiltered. So it comes as no surprise that he came out firing at Sealski there. That was a pretty funny moment, and maybe we'll see more of that as the season goes along.
Yeah, they got to get him for the DeSakis commercials. He's the most interesting man in the world, not that other guy. Get that guy out of there. Put Jake Voracek in there.
There you go.
Hey, he's growing the hair for it. You just got to put it a little bit more together.
Absolutely.
Put some more product in it. Then it'll be good.
Anyway, you guys mentioned before that Kevin Hayes having to pick up the slack with Sean Couturier now going out. And I want to touch on that. The Flyers already being bitten a little bit by the injury bug. Obviously, Couturier, we've got Gostisbehere out. Who knows when he's going to be back. And now Phil Myers and Morgan Frost both going in for MRIs. And their status for the immediate future now up in the air. We'll start with Couturier. Obviously, that is a huge loss. And hopefully he won't be out for too long. I believe the last I read was 2 weeks. But, Steve, we'll start with you. What's your reaction to Coots going out, and what do you think the team can do to kind of atone for that?
Well, basically what they try to do is have Kevin Hayes really pick up the slack, and then also the fourth line with Lawton, Raffle, and Aubie Kubel. And I think that Lawton line has been pretty much our most steady line, not just in playing together, but also of their performance. Then they're a trio that can chip in offensively when needed, and they can be very sound defensively. So I think we'll see more of like our technical fourth line getting some more time against, especially like top two lines on other teams. I think they were against Crosby and Malkin quite a bit in the first 2 games, which is good to see because they weren't completely wrecked, I believe, based off the eye test. But they will probably go with Hayes. Nolan Patrick has shown that he is, with missing 500 some days
a little bit rusty.
Out of hockey, and he wasn't. I wouldn't even say he was that rusty. I mean, he looked very, very sound. He just looked very solid overall, especially when he was playing with JVR and Voracek, I believe, and he was able to back check everything, get everything going. So it's really just next man up. Unfortunately, I really feel bad for Morgan Frost. He gets the opportunity and then he gets knocked out of the game. I'm hoping that he'll be okay because he could really spark, not that we really need it right now, the offense, but he would be able to like really spark it up another notch basically because he has that talent. And then Hayes and Walton, those lines could really hold it down defensively when needed. But Couturier's loss is huge. He's, in my opinion, the best player on the team, the best forward on the team, him still better than Provorov for best all-around player, but it sucks. It's a minimum of 2 weeks, I believe, but everything I've been seeing from people saying that they've dealt with that injury is that it just keeps bothering you. So hopefully they gave him some time and we're able to just truck on through and continue to win without him. And then when he comes back, he's healthy and we get even better.
Yeah, I need to look up the injury, the exact title of the injury. I saw it before. It sounds really painful, but yeah, hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later, because being out 2 weeks in a shortened 56 game season, that's more than, if you know what I'm saying, it's more than being out 2 weeks in an 82 game season.
It's almost equivalent to like a month almost.
Yeah.
A month, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully he can heal up quickly and get back out there, because he's such an important part of that forward group that they have there. But as we talked about, they have so much depth that it shouldn't be too much of a deficit not having him in. As you mentioned, Nolan Patrick, he's coming back after not playing for a pretty long time, but getting acclimated pretty quickly. So, and he kind of could provide that same type of play that Couturier did, the big physical presence, the net mouth presence that they need. So maybe he could be that guy who steps in there and kind of atones for Couturier not being in. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think that they'll be just fine. I don't think they'll lose a whole lot of productivity, maybe a little bit. But, 4 games into the season, it's better to lose Couturier early in the season than late in the season. So at least they've got that going there.
Yeah.
Bork, what's your thoughts on the injury situation here?
I think obviously the Coots injury is you lost the best defender in hockey. He just won the Selke, but and he's also a hell of an offensive player. I think Morgan, though, did look really solid, especially in the next game yesterday, before injury, coming in and flying around the ice. So it's very unfortunate. That's his first career injury, if I'm not mistaken, either. So I'm hoping that's something quick for him, because when it's your first thing, that could affect you sometimes a little bit more too. So I'm hoping that's a quick turnaround for him. I've been very impressed, as Steve hinted at, with Patrick coming back from over 300 and some days of playing hockey. He already has the 3 points in
I said
the
5
4
games.
games.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah. But he's been absolutely bonkers playing with that line. That's been our most consistent offensive line. I would say probably what Steve said, our most consistent overall line is probably that Raffle, Lawton, Abe-Kubel. But since they moved Patrick between Lindblom and Konechny, that's been our best offensive matching, where TK, after breaking out last year, looks like he's breaking out even more to start this year. So it definitely seems like we're going on the right track there. I think what I have to see is I saw Lindblom and others and Patrick and JVR really get in more on the forecheck with physicality. One of them even got knocked over by Ristolainen and got right back up yesterday. I can't remember if that was Reamer or Lindblom, but they were playing in that more tenacious forechecking mentality without Coots in. That's what you're going to need to do to be the most effective, because he gets rid of some of those little defensive mistakes, or the big ones, that you don't even notice when he's out there, just because he's that good. So what we did yesterday is, I think, what's going to be getting in, having Lindblom, having Konechny, having Patrick, others play in that fourth line. They started against the Eichel line. He has all the confidence in the world, AV, because he said he doesn't even consider his lines 1 through 4 lines. He just considers them whatever their strength is. And I think that's a good mentality as a head coach, because that's just putting even more brute confidence in your players. The one thing that obviously concerns me now is I have confidence from watching him in the minors, and otherwise in a guy like Bunneman stepping up at least as a 200-foot guy. If Frost were to be out for a bit, and with how good Patrick is, playing him extra time, maybe on the second line, or flipping the lines and playing the TK, Patrick and Lindblom line more than the G and Van Riemsdyk, so you don't play Bunny as much, something like that. Myers being out on defense with how our defense is playing is concerning me a little more, especially with, like you said, Rob, Taron Hatcher said with Derek Pouliot coming up, that could potentially mean not good news for Philip Myers. So I think that will have a more lasting effect than just Frost being out, because if Frost is out during the same time of when Cooch is going to be able to come back, that's a bigger replacement than what we're able to do for somebody like Phil Myers. And I like Mark Friedman. It's just Mark Friedman's not Philip Myers. I would have liked Mark Friedman in over someone like Justin Braun, for example, because he's younger and plays the same type of simplistic game, but you don't want to have to put him in for someone like Phil Myers to replace his game, because that's not going to be the case. I think we'll be able to hold it down, but because our defense has looked shaky, losing Myers concerns me more than a Frost loss, because our offense has looked pretty ample.
Yeah, Myers is. I didn't really touch on Myers because we're still waiting to get some news on it. But I think Pouliot's really just in case situation to get him on the taxi squad. Freeman, I think he could really step in and just be a solid, sound guy. But again, nothing more than the third pairing right now, unless he really impresses. But it's the backside of that is you're getting more ice time in Justin Braun, who I think looks really slow so far, and Gustafsson just looked like trash in our zone.
That's what I was about to say. I'm glad you brought that up. Justin Braun, that's why I didn't agree with re-signing him for 2 years. They should have just did 1 year because he's slower now. You have a guy like Hag who is Justin Braun and isn't as slow because he's not 34. So it didn't make any sense to keep Justin Braun, but now that we have him, you have him in. I really do like Friedman as a guy that's just the guy you're putting him in for is not the guy I would have had him in. I would have already had him in for Ghost or not Ghost, excuse me, for Braun. And then until at least Ghost came back is what I meant to say, because Braun has just been really slowing down out there now and really seems like that sixth defenseman or seventh guy on a team now where Niski took him under his ring last year and really liked him. So he learned from one of the better guys to learn from. So I'm really excited to see what he's able to do with his chance this year, because he did show some good things last year.
Yeah, I like the potential of Mark Friedman. It's just a matter of getting him on the ice and him just proving it.
I think your Reef hit it on the head, though. He's 5'11". I don't know if you guys would agree with this, though, but when I was on with him, he said if he was about 3 inches taller, he would probably already have been in the lineup.
Oh, probably.
Size definitely does matter.
Size is NHL.
Exactly. Yeah.
Size matters. Just remember that. But yeah, losing Phil Myers, I didn't really touch on it either, but it's good that you brought it up, Bork. The defense has been the weakest link so far. So losing a key defenseman like that, and a situation where they really haven't found their groove defensively, and they kind of still need to mix things up a little bit to get the correct defensive pairings, and just losing him, it throws that off a little bit. So hopefully he's not out for too long. But Freeman, I have faith that he can come in, he can do a pretty good job, because from what we've seen from him so far, it's been pretty decent. He isn't the best defenseman in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but he's certainly a guy who can come in and get the job done when they need him to. So just hopefully they can find some form of stability until Myers comes up. And then once Myers comes back, Rob, hopefully they'll be able to solidify everything.
Yeah, Rob, you might like this song, but he's like the country song Simple. That's Mark Friedman's game. Simple as can be. That's exactly how he plays, and I saw it in Lehigh too, and that's a good thing. That's why I like him coming in now, because maybe he'll help other guys get the mentality, just simplify your game, because that's what I've seen with some of our defenders right now. For some reason, they're just making things overly complicated at times, other than Ivan Provorov and, for the most part, Sanheim.
You mean like Gustafsson, right?
Yeah.
He's been pretty bad, at least in the defensive end. And Steve, I know you mentioned earlier in the show you've got some feelings on that. Why don't you get into that a little bit?
All right. We're friends here. You've claimed and clamored that Shane Gostisbehere is this defensive liability, and I just want
he is.
I just want to understand, how do you feel about Erik Gustafsson so far?
Well, I feel the same way.
It's been 4 games.
I feel the same way about Gustafsson as I felt for the past few years now about Gostisbehere. But
Gustafsson has been so much worse. But continue with your butt.
I was gonna say we've only seen 4 games from Gustafsson. Obviously, he's been around for a while. We didn't get to see as much of him when he was out in Chicago, but we've seen a few years now of Shane Gostisbehere being completely subpar defensively. And I still, the jury is still out on Gustafsson.
There's no jury to be out of. He is not good defensively. Everybody's known this in the NHL. He's an offensive, only defenseman. He can help your power play. He's going to be trash in the defensive zone.
And
Ghost has shown much more potential in the defensive zone. I think
disagree.
that you believe that Ghost is a defensive liability because he's a little bit more flashy than Gustafsson is. He makes kind of like the more flashy plays. Ghost, I still think, is much more solid defensively than Erik Gustafsson, which still isn't saying much. But Gustafsson makes these, just in the 4 games that we've seen, he is making these complete, just infuriating decisions in the defensive zone of trying to clear it. He's half-heartedly clearing the puck with his backhand. He's just nudging it up along for a pass, but there's someone right there. Ghost, I don't think ever made these. From what I can remember, it's been a while. Ghost is also hurt, like the last time we really saw him. But I feel like Ghost's miscues or such were in transition, neutral zone that kind of bit us in the ass. Sure, I can give you that. But I've seen Ghost make more solid defensive plays than I've seen in Gustafsson at all. And that's why I think Ghost and Provorov will be fine together. They've had the chemistry before. They'll solidify the top pair. It's just a matter of Gustafsson getting his shit together in the defensive zone. But hey, he helped our second unit power play. So.
See, my issue with Ghost, though, is you mentioned the transition, and that's where he's constantly out of position. I can't remember the last time I actually saw him in the proper position to make a play in transition. Maybe there were a couple times in the playoffs last year, but other than that, he's constantly out of position, and it leads to these odd man rushes for the opposition, and that's my issue with him. Defensively, he does make smarter plays than what we've seen from Gustafsson so far. So I will give him that. It's the positioning that always throws me off with him. That's why I call him a defensive liability.
But I'm with a guy who can actually complete a pass, unlike Braun or Hag, and he will excel, and he won't be such a defensive liability that you claim he is.
Well, I had a question for Rob pertaining to that, though, because if we go from when he first came up in 15-16 through 17-18, Ghost was his most healthiest. He didn't have the double knee issues, right. Where he was actually able to get back more. Then he started having that in 18-19, and of course last year in the Jackie Robinson number of games he played. And then he came back and played a decent playoffs. If he's fully healthy again with his legs, as per rumor, do you think there's a better chance the jury's still out on Ghost being able to be in better position again, Rob? Because maybe part of that had to do with he didn't have the leg strength to always get in the position he should have been in.
I see your point, Bork, and I like it.
Yeah, you could. I will concede you could make a case with that, and if he does improve on that now that when he comes back healthy, then I will be open to retracting my statement on him being a defensive liability. But as of right now, I stand where I stand. I believe he is a defensive liability. And let's face it, for the first half of his career, his offense carried him. That's what made him, a good option to have in the lineup. And ever since his offense has kind of decreased, he's become a full-out liability, in my opinion. He's been missing the net more often with his shots, has not been accurate really at all, and his value to the power play unit has gone down over that time. So
they took him off, and he never got a chance to get it back.
Yeah, last year they did kind of just Ghost was on the power play unit, and then AV kind of pulled him.
Well, they took him off because he didn't deserve to be on.
He did. He could have at least been on the second unit, but even then, they just started scratching him.
Yeah.
Giroux had. I'll give you this, and I apologize for interrupting, but I just feel like I have to, and I apologize again. Gustafsson and Farabee have found a very good chemistry so far in these 4 games on that second unit, with Farabee on the left wall and Gustafsson playing that point. And they can get the passes to each other, much like Giroux and Ghost had that chemistry as well in the same positions, where Giroux could either utilize Ghost as a fake slap shot and then get a cross-ice pass to Voracek, which worked so well for about 2-3 years. And then when you replace Ghost with Provorov, they're trying to rekindle that, but it doesn't work as well. And I'm not saying Provorov's bad on the power play. I love Provorov. It's our best defenseman. But imagine if you had Provorov and Gustafsson running the second unit where they can kind of utilize each other there, and then Ghost really refixing that. But again, our power play is not the issue. The only strength that Gustafsson has on this team right now is for that second unit power play. Yeah, I think Ghost could solidify things with Provorov at least.
We'll agree to disagree there. Although I would
I
love.
refuse. I will not agree that.
For me, though, I just feel if Ghost has his legs, he'll get back to. Because before he started having the issues bother him, he was still able to put up 37 points in a season. He played through some stuff in the 78 games he played in 18-19. If he's able to actually have his full leg strength back, I think when you're an offensive defenseman, that really goes a long way in being able to produce the best. I mean, we saw it with Erik Karlsson the last. Obviously, Ghost is not Erik Karlsson, don't get me wrong. But the last couple seasons since he's gone to San Jose has been injured and hasn't been the same. He's come in now saying he's fully healthy and has looked much better so far. So maybe the same can happen for Ghost at the capacity of where Ghost once was. He's obviously not going to become Erik Karlsson. Don't get me wrong, but the same can happen where he can start to rebound and become his normal, natural self again once his leg strength is back.
Hey, if he does that, I will happily swallow my words about him. But
And I will be there just to shove them down your throat.
of course you will. But the issue with him is early on in his career, and maybe this does have to do with being injured, but his shot was so much more accurate. His slap shot, every time he got teed up on the power play, he was able to get it on goal. And these past few seasons, it feels like the majority of the time that he's been teed up for that slap shot ends up going wide of the net. And if you don't put it on net, obviously it's not going to go in. I mean, maybe you could hope for a deflection out in front, but you got to be able to put it between the pipes. Not.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you, and I'm actually agreeing with you here. His shot has not been as accurate as it was the first couple of years. That can be adjustments made by other teams, seeing how dangerous the shot is. And then they position themselves differently, kind of get in his line of sight. But I think if there's one thing he could learn from Erik Gustafsson, it's that like wrister instead that Gustafsson seems to be very good at, as Patrick and JVR both got deflection goals from it. But again, if Ghost can solidify the top pair with Provorov, then you could have very good offensive powerhouses on your power play units on the defense in Erik Gustafsson and Shane Gostisbehere. There's a world where they could work together on the same team, but right now, based off the defensive play I've seen from Erik Gustafsson, I am sick.
Yeah, it's his defensive play has left a lot to be desired so far.
And he's not with the right partners either. Him and Hag is just terrible.
No, that's part of the mixing and matching that we talked about earlier. And through 4 games, they've kind of, I guess, haven't had a whole lot of time to see who works best with whom. So hopefully AV, being the experienced head coach that he is, can kind of see through that and mix and match a little bit and get Gus on the right pairing, get Hag on the right pairing, and hopefully that'll kind of smooth over some of the defensive shortcomings that they've had so far. And obviously getting guys back from injury when they come back, that'll help as well.
Well, because with Hag, I don't think personally myself, he's looked really bad, honestly, so far this year. I think whoever he's been partnered with has hung him out to dry a couple times, whether it was Justin Braun at times or Gustafsson just leaving the puck somewhere, and then Robert Hag's just like, oh, well, shit. So, I feel like he's just been kind of trapped in a hard place a little bit this year as they're trying to figure out the defensive pairings, and he's actually looked a little bit better than his numbers are actually showing thus far, but that's just the way I feel.
I love the idea of Robert Hag. I like Robert Hag. I just think I'm tired of watching him on the Flyers, unfortunately. I mean, I like him. Swedish defensive defenseman. I have a soft spot for those, but I just think that he's more of like a Western Conference kind of defenseman, and I think if he were to move there, he would excel more. But here, it's just watching him every time. It's like, oh man, I love the idea of you, and you do have some potential, but I just don't see it fitting in with our defensive roster right now, and I feel bad because I love the idea of Robert Hag. I just don't think it's going to work out here in the long term, no matter how much we try.
I don't know. I still like him, though, because I'm worried if we trade him, he's going to become a version of kind of like a mini version at least, which I think he still could become at least a mini version of how Graves developed in Colorado. And I don't want to trade a guy to the West and then have Vegas or somebody turn Robert Hag into the next Ryan Graves, who has now become a pretty good anchor that pounds people's bodies, and you don't want to go anywhere near on the ice. That's the one thing that would worry me, where I feel like you might be able to, with the right partner, make
I 100% agree
on our team. But
Or
I
you're
100% agree.
You're a Philadelphia sports fan. That's what happens to literally every single player who leaves Philadelphia and goes somewhere else. They get
exactly.
better.
But when looking at him, I feel like, for my personal opinion, there's like a 90% chance a good team is going to develop him into a mini Graves-esque guy, when I think we could do that ourselves once we finally find him the right guy to pair him with, and don't keep putting him with guys that don't match his skill set as much.
I was saying I 100% agree with you until you said that we could do it, but we can't. I just don't see any future where we can actually develop him into that guy. I just don't see it happening. I agree with Rob where, yes, we would trade him, and then he would, just become better what he was drafted to be, but I just don't see it happening here. And it's a shitty thought process of mine, but I can't help it. I just think that he would do well elsewhere and that we would do well without him. So, shitty thought process. Like I said, love the idea of Robert.
He might be one of
like Robert Hag. We should trade him for the better of our team and his future.
He might be one of the guys that gets pushed by Yeager anyhow down the future when Zamula is able to come up anyhow. So it might not even be a discussion that much as we head down into the future with this team, but we'll have to see.
Right.
All right, so the Flyers, their first 4 games they've played, 2 against the Penguins, who are had been struggling. They were able to light up the scoreboard against them. 2 against Buffalo, obviously the bad 6-1 loss, and then bouncing back with a 3-0 win. Next 2 games against a team that a lot of people think could be contending for the Cup this year, the Boston Bruins, who have played some low-scoring hockey so far. They had a 3-2 shootout win, 2-1 overtime loss, and a 1-0 regulation loss against the Islanders. Do you think that Boston seemingly playing a more defensive style, at least through their first 3 games this season? Steve, we'll start with you. Do you think that could present a challenge for the Flyers, or do you think that the Flyers could be able to have some success in these next 2 games against Boston?
I mean, I haven't seen any of their games, but I can 100% see why they would try to be playing a more defensive style, in a sense, to make up for the loss of Krug and Chara. But it doesn't necessarily scare me because of how good our offense has been when it really needs to be. But it's still, I mean, Pasternak's out still, I believe. The Bruins just don't really scare me this year. They really don't. I just don't think they signed Craig Smith. He's a good signing. He's a good player, but I just think that they should have allocated that money to a defenseman to just try to fill the loss of Krug and the potential loss at the time of Chara, but they didn't. That's on them. They just don't scare me. I think we should be fine against them.
Yeah, I like these experts who went out there and predicted Boston should be a Cup final contender. I could see, I guess, where they're coming from. I'm kind of with you, though, that they don't really scare me. Beyond their top line, they don't have a whole lot of scoring depth. And, Bergeron's another year older, Marchand's another year older. Still very, very good players, but especially without Pastrnak in the lineup, they kind of lack a little bit of explosiveness, and they've struggled offensively in their first 3 games. And maybe with those offensive struggles and without Pastrnak, this is the Flyers' chance to kind of get right against a team that's struggling offensively. Bork, what's your take on this, the Flyers' next 2 games against Boston?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head at the end there. I think having Pasta out, they really run their scoring effectiveness through him, and that's how it's been for the past couple years now, and that's been why their 5-on-5 has really not been great at all. And then Semyon Varlamov on Sunday just decided they weren't winning the game. So that was really what happened there. But their defense, I think it's not the most. They have some young guys, sure, but they have to develop. Like their defense right now with the offensive mindset we're playing with, I think we should be able to take advantage of a youngster like a Lazan or a Carlo who's still trying to develop into more of a top 2 guy now rather than being sheltered by having Krug and Chara on the team. So I think they aren't as impressive as they used to be. I honestly can't really tell you why some people picked them as highly as they did, because I think they're a team that's going to make the playoffs, obviously, but I have them third in the division in my mind, and I think maybe it's because their goaltending duo did win the Jennings and people think their offense will be good enough. Maybe that's it, but you have a developing defense that has a lot of new parts now that really needs to figure out how to work it into place with the Zaboros of the world, and now guys like Kevin Miller, who are more of a seventh defenseman probably at this point of his career, always playing for you. So it's going to be interesting, unless if you put in Moore or Clifton, but they've been scratching them. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Flyers are able to do. But I think they should at least win one of two against the Bruins and take advantage of them, where I could see a goaltender definitely stealing a game for the Bruins, as they have already done for them. Both of their goalies have started off really hot.
They have two very good goalies, and I think that they were really chosen, as you guys are saying, as cup contenders, like kind of near locks for the playoffs. And I think it's based off reputation, which I personally understand, because every year I find they're depth guys. I'm like, who the fuck is this? And he scores 15 goals. It's just every year, they are run very well. I can't lie. They are. And then they have Tuukka Rask, phenomenal goalie, and then Yaroslav Halak, phenomenal backup, So they have the goaltending to kind of mask their defensive issues that they more than likely should be having this year. But, yeah, I think we can pull it off, but I could also see, a Halak or Rask stealing a game.
So what you're saying is Trent Frederick, who took a while to develop as their 2016 first-round pick, is all of a sudden going to score 15 goals now. I got you. Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know, man. It's 56 game season. He might score, what was on pace for 15. But, yeah, basically, yes. But no, I know that name, so that's why that won't happen. It'll be some random third-round pick they have that I don't know.
Yeah, I could see it. I could also see one of these games being kind of like that game that they had in Philadelphia right before the shutdown last season, where Tuukka Rask kind of stood on his head, made 35 saves, and it was a 2-0 shutout win for the Bruins. Ended a long point streak or winning streak for the Flyers at that point. But yeah, I think the Flyers actually, if I had to make a prediction for these next two games, I could see them actually sweeping them. With Boston's struggles offensively, and I don't remember if I said the Flyers would get right offensively or defensively. I meant to say that they could get right defensively with Boston's struggles. So maybe that comes to fruition, and I could see the Flyers continuing to perform well offensively. I could easily see them sweeping this 2-game series here. I wouldn't be disappointed with a split, but I could totally see the Flyers taking both here.
I'm not as bullish on that, only because of our injuries. If we had everybody in, I would definitely be riding with that, because of the way Boston has played. I would easily think we could sweep them. It's just everybody that's out. That's why I'm not as bullish.
Yeah, I agree with Bork there.
Fair enough. And by the way, I do want to take responsibility. I believe in the preseason, the season preview episode, I did say that Buffalo would have a terrible time in this division, and of course, the first time we play them, they come out and kick our ass 6-1. So I will take responsible for kind of jinxing that situation there.
I'll take partial responsibility as well, because I agreed. I was like, yeah, no, fuck them.
Okay, so you guys have anything else you want to throw in here before we wrap up this episode?
The only thing I had was just to echo what AV's been saying. Lindblom is that 100% effort guy. It's great to have him back in the lineup. He makes everyone around him play better just by looking at the way he played. And this year, JVR, like AV shouted out, I want to give him credit for bouncing back. He had a pretty solid first year here, not last year. Didn't have a good year at all. And then this year seems to be playing with tenacity and grit, which I try not to laugh every time I say now because of gritty. And really good effectiveness all over the ice, and AV shouting them out for that. And that's why I love this coaching staff, because they give you credit where credit's due, whether you get on the stat sheet or not. Some coaches are not nearly as good, Dave Haxtell, at doing that. So
that fucking guy.
Fuck that guy. Yeah. Steve, you got anything else you want to add in?
The Capitals, I'm going within the division, but NHL. The Capitals got fined $100,000 for violating COVID protocol, right? And there's a statement from Alex Ovechkin, and I'm quoting this. This is hilarious. And I quote Alex Ovechkin, I regret my choice.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
I regret my choice to spend time together with my teammates in our hotel room and away from the locker room areas. I will learn from this experience.
That's the
Fucking
most
hilarious.
Ovechkin way to respond to that.
It's fucking great.
Gotta love
Fucking
Ovi,
love
man.
that guy.
Gotta love Ovi. Well, anyway, my final thought here is, once again, if you're looking for something to eat while you're watching the Flyers or any other life situation where you need some food, look no further than Just Food. You can find them by phone at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. They're located in Buckingham Green over in Buckingham, PA, off of York Road. An excellent selection of food, literally anything you want, they've got it there. Their owner, Asian Rob, a great friend of the Always Next Year podcast network. Tell him we sent you. Awesome food there. You will not be disappointed. I love going there to get my food. Really, really good stuff. You can find them by phone, once again, at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. Once again, Just Food, located in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Disciples of Ed. We'll be back with another one next week.
I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, danced a jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.